Welcome to the Politics and Media Show with me, John Rees. In the first half of tonight's show, we're discussing the controversial announcement last week that the Charity Commission is opening a formal investigation into allegations that a major mosque in East London is promoting terrorism and extremism. The claims against the Tawhid Mosque in Leighton go back to 2007, when a report by the right-wing think tank, the Policy Exchange, claimed that extremist literature was being distributed at the mosque. That report was discredited in a BBC Newsnight report, and it is now thought to be based on forged evidence. The new allegations centre on claims that the cleric Abu Qatada held a study session at the mosque in 1998, and that another cleric, Anwar Al Awlaki, who was killed in Yemen last year, also spoke several times at the mosque in 2003. Well, before I introduce our studio guests, let's take a look at this report.
The Charity Commission is investigating a mosque in East London over what's been described as potential links to a terrorist and extremist group. The Commission says it's beginning a statutory inquiry into Masjid Al Tawhid in Leighton. The action was instigated by a letter from Imam Usama Hasan, who left the mosque following past disputes. But members of the mosque say there were long-standing issues and disputes with Hassan, who they accuse of attempting to fulfill a vendetta against the mosque via his claims of extremist links. The mosque, in fact, points out that his complaints date back to the mosque's previous management and that his claims of possible links to terrorists are completely unfounded. The mosque's current chairman, Mahmood Patel, said he was shocked to hear the accusations and that Hassan had at no point raised the complaints with the mosque. A trustee of the mosque, Talat Sultan, released the following statement.
This is clearly a smear campaign and an attempt to undermine the current arbitration process. We are seeking legal advice on the course of action we should take. In consultation with our lawyer, we are currently preparing a press release, which will be made public later this week, inshallah.
Well, with me to discuss in the studio these issues is Mahmood Patel, the current chair of Tawhid Mosque Board of Trustees. We have Judge Khurshid Drabu, chair of the Mosques Imams Advisory Board, who's joining us on the phone. We also have Usama Hasan, a former chairman of the Tawhid Mosque, here in the studio. And finally, we have Saghir Hussain, a human rights barrister. Welcome to the programme, everybody. Mahmood, in that clip, you expressed surprise that these allegations have come forward. They've been around for a while, though, now?
Yeah, yes, I believe so. The allegation was only recently made just as when the arbitration process has started. And obviously, Usama Hasan has resigned from the trust voluntarily. It appears that as erratic as Usama Hasan is, and he loves the media, he loves the media publicity. This is clearly, in my opinion, is to derail the arbitration process and to scare the people, general public and the authorities, since the mosque is in the Olympic zone and the authorities are really concerned about the security. This is the very reason that we believe this allegation has come out in the open now.
Usama, I mean, obviously there's a history of sort of disputes in the mosque, but I don't really want to get into that, because it seems to me that there's a bigger issue here, which is that these have been long-standing allegations, the previous set of which seems to me to have been discredited. Why do you think it's important that these are brought forward now?
Well, there are a number of inaccuracies in what's been said so far. I'm former vice chairman, by the way, and under the arbitration I resigned, but Mahmood is also the current vice chairman and not the chairman, as incorrectly stated. And it's absolutely, frankly, ridiculous to accuse me of a personal vendetta against the mosque. I've been part of the mosque for 30 years. I've led the prayers for over 25 years. I have organised numerous activities there. And just for the record, I had written to the Charity Commission, as many other people had done. The last time I wrote to them was in April. On May the 10th, the arbitration proceedings began. On May the 17th, they ended with the resignation of myself and several others. We did not know that the Charity Commission had begun an investigation on the 11th of May, because they wrote to us 2 weeks later. And they mentioned, in their letter to me, they mentioned mediation. So they didn't even know that arbitration was happening. They thought there was still mediation. Meanwhile, we were having arbitration, and we had concluded that. And we didn't know the Charity Commission had begun this very serious investigation. Now, after this came to light, the arbiter in the arbitration specifically asked me to withdraw my complaint to the Charity Commission, which I did. But because other people had complained also, they appear not to have closed their investigation. And so again, there was another inaccuracy to say it was based on my complaint. There were many people who complained about what went on over the last year and a half, and I don't want to go into the details, but there clearly is a problem of extremism amongst mosques in general. In the Muslim community, we've had this problem for many, many years, and I'm sorry to say that clip tried to blame everything on me, as Mahmood Patel has also tried to make this ridiculous accusation against me. Alhamdulillah, I've memorized the Quran in 2 riwayat. I've led the prayers for 25 years. I led Tarawih for over 20 years. I gave the Friday sermon for 15, 20 years. Many people have asked me to start doing that again. And as viewers of the channel know, I was a regular here for 4 or 5 years on the weekly Islamic show and on the Journey Through the Quran show. And what we've seen here is actually a personal vendetta against me, actually, which began last year. And it's very sad that I'm being accused of the reverse.
I totally disagree.
Okay, just hang on a moment, because there's other guests that I want to bring in. I mean, all right, we've heard both sides of the argument in the mosque, but there's a big picture here, isn't there? That if you get a Charity Commission investigation into a mosque like this, it's a very serious matter.
First of all, can I just declare my personal interest? I have been advising Mahmood and his group of people in that, so I think that interest needs to be declared first of all. Secondly, I want to avoid any sort of personalising issues, and I think, like I said, I'm interested in the wider picture, in the sense that I think this is the first time the Charity Commission has ever intervened in a Muslim organisation, or certainly in a Muslim mosque. And that sense sets a very dangerous precedent, as far as I'm concerned. Because faith, whether it's Christians, Jewish or Islamic, it should be an independent personal matter. There's no room for the state to be intervening in that sort of situation. If there's any illegalities, any kind of breaking of the law, no mosque is out of bounds for the police. Police can go to the mosques, they can arrest people, they can talk to trustees, they can talk to individuals, and that does happen. What surprises me is that here we're talking about a period when I think yourself, you were the vice chairman or one of the trustees, and your father was the chairman, and
Mahmood was the trustee.
And Mahmood was the trustee. So in other words, they haven't come before; they just come now, and that's unfortunate because after many years of dispute, whatever the reasons may be, there's an arbitration going on. I think which all accept it's been a sort of fair arbitration going on, and now the Charity Commission's come in, and like Mahmood said, because the headlines, the words, Olympics, extremism, Muslim, as soon as they're put together, the media have their own agenda, and the Muslims are there to be demonized every day. And it's unfortunate that that story is now going to run and run and run. Whatever the personal issues are within Masjid Al Tawhid, that's another matter, and I would say we should leave that to the arbitrator to sort out, and I hope they can sort that very quickly. My concern is with the Charity Commission to get involved at this stage.
Well, let me bring in Judge Khurshid Drabu, who's joined us on the phone. Thanks for joining us. The involvement of the Charity Commission is unprecedented here, and doesn't Saghir have a point when he says that the Charity Commission seems to operate as a kind of a quasi-legal body that has a force in these issues, which is nothing to do actually with whether or not somebody's actually broken the law. So there's a kind of subjudicial, semi-legal process going here. It's not exactly transparent, is it?
It's not. Let me clarify my position. I'm not the chair of MINAB. I'm an advisor to the MINAB, having helped in setting it up 3 years ago. But I mean, MINAB certainly has a view on this matter, as it should, on any matters relating to mosque. I have to say that I'm deeply concerned and very surprised that Charity Commission has taken this action, because it would seem that the action has been generated or has been started by a complaint from an individual, and an allegation has been made, the basis of which is purely historical from what I have seen in the press reports. That's all I'm going by. I don't know the full facts of the case, but it would seem extremely surprising for the Charity Commission to be exercising its statutory powers of investigation in this instance, because there does not appear to be any real evidence, as is disclosed in the letter written by the Charity Commission to Mr. Imam Usama, or any other communication that has appeared in the press, which would suggest that the mosque is involved in recent times on any matter related to extremism or terrorism. These are emotive phrases which are being bandied about irresponsibly to the detriment of the Muslim community up and down the country. And when Brother Usama, I heard him say that this is a problem that Muslims have throughout the country, I beg to differ. I think there are problems, there have been problems, but those problems have not necessarily been associated with mosques. No mosque has been investigated by the Charity Commission so far. This is the first case, and I would very much hope that the Charity Commission understands and realizes that criminal charges can arise out of this investigation, and they should be very careful in jumping and launching an investigation which can cause a lot of difficulties for the whole of the Muslim community in the country. And Charity Commission, being a regulatory body, has to have public confidence. If that public confidence is dented or eroded, it will lose its credibility and it will lose a very important stakeholder in the process of regulation of mosques.
Okay, Mahmood, look, setting aside whatever the discussions between you are on the history of the running of the mosque, these claims that have gone to Charity Commission now precede the already discredited claims in 2007. They, as far as I see it, they are referring to events that happened either in 1998 or 2003. Do you see what the Charity Commission's basis for investigation is of things which are now at best nearly a decade in the past?
Not at all. I mean, the link that they are referring to is more than a decade old, and the link that they're connecting Anwar Al Awlaki to Masjid Al Tawhid goes back to 2002-2003, when Sheikh Usama himself was in charge. What I'm astonished about is he is the one who instigated this allegation. When he was a vice chair of the trust, his father was a chair of the trust, and his brother-in-law, Liaquat Ali, these were the three very people who were in charge of all the Islamic activities, Islamic events, dawah work, etc. So they were responsible. They should have known better. Frankly, I cannot understand how he could have linked this allegation now, which happened so long ago when he was personally in charge of the operation at the time of the masjid.
I understand that you said that you withdrew your complaint to the Charity Commission, but I mean, having done that, can you understand why it is that they are acting on events which are now, as I say, more than nearly a decade in the past?
Well, I think people are perhaps not as well informed as they could be. So firstly, contrary to what the judge said, it's not just an individual allegation. There have been many people who have complained to the Charity Commission about what's happened over the last year or so. And in fact, I can say this much, is that during the dispute last year, extremists from outside the mosque certainly got involved and were promoting all kinds of ideas around the mosque on their websites and through various other means. And I believe the Charity Commission are aware of that. And I also beg to differ from the judge that we don't have a problem with extremism in the mosques. So, for example, I know a Friday sermon given last year in another London mosque where the khatib said that it's prohibited for women to wear trousers, and a woman wearing trousers is not allowed in the mosque, for example. When I myself preached for many years, in 2003 when I preached against the Madrid bombings, there were people who came up to me afterwards and said, "Thank you for doing that. We were celebrating the Madrid bombings." We've had convicted terrorists in our area. And who come to the mosque. I'm saying that there is extremism.
No, I just can't see that connection there between whatever the disputes might be about women in trousers and the Madrid bombing. I'm lost there.
Okay, no. Well, I should clarify. The Charity Commission have clearly said in their letter they're looking at both violent and non-violent extremism. Because the current government is very concerned about non-violent extremism as well.
Sorry,
on the basis of
you'll have to walk me
community
through,
cohesion.
You're losing me here. You'll just have to walk me through this. The Madrid bombings, all right, that's an act of terrorism. Women wearing trousers, whatever you think about it. Why is this an issue for the Charity Commission? I'm lost.
Because for a preacher to preach that women in trousers are not allowed in the mosque is a seriously divisive issue, and it's an impediment to gender equality and women's rights in this country. I'm talking about there are many examples of this kind of extremist rhetoric.
Would you expect the Charity Commission to go into a Catholic church where they say, well, we oppose to homosexuality? Would you expect the Prevent strand of the Charity Commission, the faith unit, which is funded by Prevent money, sort of getting in there and say, look, yeah, we're going to go into a Catholic church, we're going to go into an Israeli, a Jewish synagogue which sponsors settlements in Israel. That's extremism. Do you know what I mean? In other words, this is particularly picking on Muslims and Islamic institutions. I think there's a much wider agenda. And I accept your word. You say you withdrawn the complaint, and there are other people who are making the complaint. But nevertheless, I think the Charity Commission need to be held to account as to that. What are they really doing it? Who's advising them? Who are the experts who are working with them? And like we said, there's a difference in our doctrinal issues, our opinions about evolution, about hijab, about women wearing trousers, rights of women, all this generally. These are differences that most faith communities have amongst themselves. Now, why should the state be getting involved in that as long as you're not breaking the law? As long as you're not promoting bombing places, as long as you're not promoting violence, why should the state be getting involved in that?
Well, that's why there is an issue, because the Finsbury Park Mosque, of course, famously was taken over by somebody accused of terrorism, Abu Hamza. The divisiveness includes a leading cleric who has preached in a London mosque, and it's on the record that it's obligatory to hate Jews and Christians. And inflammatory sermons like that. There was a recent case in Bradford, which was covered by the BBC in Bradford. Again, a Friday preacher saying the Jews and Christians are all, X, Y, Z, and preaching hate against them. The Undercover Mosques documentary on Channel 4 have exposed time and time again preachers in our mosques here in Britain preaching hate.
Policy exchange.
I didn't mention policy exchange. I said undercover mosque.
Okay, you two. Mahmood.
Whenever you disagree with Usama, you become extremist. If you oppose him, you become terrorist. And that's the way you always have operated.
That's not true. I defended the mosque against the policy exchange. I was on the Newsnight.
Okay, now let me just bring Judge Khurshid Drabu back in there. What do you make of this? Why do you think that the Charity Commission is acting in this way? I mean, as Saghir was saying, some of these complaints, I mean, if the Charity Commission were to intervene in the debates in the Church of England about gay marriage, we would be astounded.
I think Brother Saghir is spot on. He is absolutely right. And I have to say that with my 30 years experience, I find it absolutely astonishing that Charity Commission should get involved in a complaint of this nature. I find it absolutely astonishing, believe me. There must be more to it than we know or we have been told. But on the basis of suggestions that somebody 10 years ago or 15 years ago made a speech in the mosque, or came to the mosque or visited the mosque or gave some literature out there, that should lead to a statutory investigation, is sheer nonsense, absolute nonsense.
Do you fear, Mahmood, at the end of this process that the Charity Commission, what would the effect be if the Charity Commission investigation found the mosque had been in breach of this or that, or had been engaged in this or that, as the accusation say? What would be the consequences for the mosque?
Well, the reputation of the mosque is already damaged immensely anyway. The consequence could be very great, of course. If there is a problem, we want to root it out. We don't want extremism or terrorism within the masjid. The website you're referring to, I believe, has got nothing to do with the trustees whatsoever. There is no extremism in that masjid as far as I know it. And I've known all the trustees personally, and they have not linked to anything that you're talking about.
The website mentioned that
the website have nothing to do with the trustees.
No, I'm afraid about people in the mosque.
They can say whatever they want. I don't agree with that.
But going back to the Charity Commission issue of the intervention, and to be honest, I think the meeting we had yesterday, the whole issue was that they welcome, they want the Charity Commission. Now that they made a decision, come on side, look, make a quick, thorough investigation, and they will see that it's a nonsensical allegation. And it's given the headlines to the relevant media journalists who are always looking for some sort of headline against Muslims and Muslim institutions. But nevertheless, now the Charity Commission want to come in. What they're saying is, come in as soon as you can, go through everything. And they'll always be looking at sort of independent management consultant and look at what the issues are so they can make a decision very quickly how dangerous a mosque really is. What we cannot afford is this constant hanging over this investigation over a very important Muslim institution that's been built up through the work of Mr. Mahmood and no doubt Usama and his father. It's one of the most important Muslim institutions in this country, and we cannot allow it to be denigrated, be demonized simply because something happened 10 years ago or something. So we need the Charity Commission to act very urgently.
I have to come back on that. It's not just 10 years ago. As I said, last year there was some very serious things happened. Extremists from outside the mosque came and distributed leaflets in the mosque saying I should be killed for my views. And Carter Rock told me
that is not true. That is not true. No one I've seen mention your death threat.
It's on the internet.
Gentlemen, one at a time. One at a time.
So there's clear extremism. You mentioned me and my dad, but you were advising, by your own admission, the people who were trying to expel me and my dad from the mosque. So I don't accept
the local community, the worshippers were not behind you. That was the reason you brought the masjid into disrepute. You brought the masjid.
No, your side brought it into disrepute.
Gentlemen, people watching this programme will not understand if you cut across each other. They won't even understand what you're saying, and they will think that you're unable to deal with this problem seriously. So let's just take this one at a time. You say that people were distributing extremist literature outside the mosque.
Inside the mosque.
And inside the mosque. That can't necessarily be held to be the fault of the authorities in the mosque. For instance, many Labour Party people will know that at Labour Party conferences or at the Tory Party conferences there are people who don't reflect the leadership's view who distribute literature. Now that wouldn't be a ground if the National Front or the British National Party distribute leaflets outside the Tory Party conference or even get into the Tory Party conference. There isn't an investigation of the Tory Party about this, is there?
That's a fair point, but I don't want to go into the history in too much detail, but the people distributing those leaflets clearly had strong links with some of the people inside the mosque. And in terms of the concerted effort last year, in terms of people like me who were being forced out, and the other speakers who were being brought in, some of whom are clear hate preachers. And as I said, there are many examples of hate preachers in this country, and the mosques have to deal with it. The undercover mosque documentary in the Channel 4 exposed that clearly, and the Muslim community have not
one
dealt
at a time, because the point is you can't have a kind of blunderbuss thing where you make a series of accusations and don't give people the chance to respond to them one by one. So, Mahmood.
Well, what I like to say, all the Friday sermons are organised by your father. He approves every speaker who come in. We organise few events, and we've been through the proper channel of vetting the people before they come to the masjid for any lectures. We vet them first. We brief them before they go on to do the lectures. Then if they say something that we feel is controversial, the person who's introducing the lecturer will say this is not endorsed by the masjid.
Sorry, how long have you been doing this for?
I
have organised most of these activities.
No. I'm talking about since we took over last June.
You did not take over, you tried to take over.
Gentlemen, I've mentioned this before.
The issue, John, is the difficulty we have here is, unfortunately, and I've seen that, I mean, it's ironic. Last week I received a phone call from somebody who's having a serious matrimonial dispute, and guess what? His wife's made allegations against. He's an extremist. Now, whenever we have breakdown in business, whether it's management of mosques, or this is so common now, the issues of extremism and the label of terrorism is being used far too widely. And I say, look, my appeal is, look, there are courses of action available for us. There's arbitrators, there are other Muslim organizations involved. Let's try to resolve these issues without necessarily jumping to the sort of the right-wing press's sort of agenda. Look, you make the allegation, we'll run a whole headline for you. No matter what happens, 3 months down the lane, it might just be completely quiet down. There's no problems to be found whatsoever. So that's the unfortunate situation we have at the moment. And this is why I'm annoyed with the Charity Commission and any statutory authorities which are statutory bound to be objective. And I accept, when you're personally involved, it becomes very emotional and very difficult to be objective. But for charity, for statutory bodies not to be objective is a very serious thing. And this is why I say, look, it's a common occurrence, unfortunately, where...
Okay, well, I'm afraid we're going to have to bring the discussion to a conclusion there. I'm sure it won't be the last discussion we have on this issue, and I hope that you'll be rejoining us for future issues of the Politics and Media Show. Welcome back to the Politics and Media Show. Many have welcomed government legislation to prevent forced marriages, but a number of charities have expressed concern that making forced marriage a crime could deter young victims from coming forward. The government wants to criminalise the practice because it believes that previous civil measures were designed to stop forced marriages have failed. The Prime Minister, David Cameron, has warned that those found responsible could expect tough sentences. But several charities have warned that victims will be less likely to report crimes because of the additional pressure that members of their family could end up in prison. Family law experts have also cast doubt on whether there is a need for a new crime to be created. Well, before I introduce tonight's guests, let's take a look at this report.
Forced marriages are to become a criminal offence in England and Wales, leaving parents who coerce their children into a marriage facing the prospect of prison. The announcement by British Prime Minister David Cameron and Home Secretary Theresa May of their intention to introduce legislation is light on detail, but it's expected that the existing civil remedy of forced marriage protection orders will continue to exist alongside the new criminal offence. Ministers also want to introduce criminal penalties for breaches of civil forced marriage protection orders, which can be used to prevent children being taken abroad to marry. But government critics say that the new measures will drive the problem underground and that it puts victims in a difficult position where they're being forced to testify against their own families. Other critics say the mere fact that victims of forced marriages are vulnerable implies they will be unlikely to even come forward. A leading lawyer on forced marriages voiced similar concerns, saying that laws already existed which would combat the problem of forced marriages.
The idea of criminalising forced marriage is very difficult. I personally, and as a practitioner, would not condone it. I do not support the idea of criminalising forced marriage. I have a number of reasons for that. But I personally don't, within that consultation, believe it should be criminalised. Education and public awareness are very important, the most important resource we have to deal with the problem. There are two areas. There's the mainstream public, the wider society, were unaware of these issues, or if they were aware of them, it doesn't happen to us. It happens to them, those people. It happens in those communities which are not our communities, which was not helpful. And then the communities themselves would be saying, well, it doesn't happen in our communities. You know, don't pick on us because we don't have that. We don't do that. And of course, over the years, we have seen much more awareness happening, awareness programs happening within the communities, but it's got to be grassroots. And the idea that that could happen within a matter, I would say, of 1 or 2 years is ridiculous. It's going to take a long period of time.
Well, in the studio to discuss this with me is Anita Prem, founder and president of the Freedom Charity. We also have the author, Sophia Ahmed, who recently wrote the book Secrets of a Henna Girl. And on the phone we have Anjum Anwar of Muslim Women's Voices. Welcome to you all. Anita, it's hardly as if there isn't legislation that could already prevent or should already prevent forced marriages. So what's so good about having another piece of legislation on this issue?
Well, we do have civil action that can be taken if parents force their children into marriage, but it's obviously not enough and it's not working. It's not giving young people protection against forced marriage. I mean, at the moment there's between 5,000 to 8,000 cases that are reported of forced marriage every year. And I think we really need to be clear what a forced marriage is. It's a young person being forced to marry against their will. And what that leads is to domestic abuse, it leads to abduction, kidnapping, serial rape, and in some cases, in the most extreme cases, murder. Young people need to be protected against all of those things.
So, Sophia, nobody obviously could possibly justify that, but do you have some reservations about whether or not this is the right way to deal with it?
I welcome the legislation. I think society needs to send out that message that it's something that is unacceptable. But my reservations come in where I hope that the government doesn't think that it's okay, that they've ticked a box and that's it, and they're just going to, you know, they don't have to do anything else. I think the problem is about education, and I think prevention is something that we should work towards more than prosecution.
Anjuman, let me just bring you in. Thank you for joining us on the phone. Do you think that this legislation will be counterproductive in the sense that, as some people have suggested, it will push people into not reporting it because of the fear of prison for people that they know or people in their families?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. can we really legislate people's thinking? That's a worrying sign, because I don't believe that one can legislate people's thinking. If that had been the case, then we would not have had 80,000 racial bullying reported in schools throughout the United Kingdom. What I'm saying is legislation can only be a safety net. It has to be education, and your earlier, the lady who's a solicitor was talking about, it has to be education. It has to come from the communities who are actually facing this problem. As a Muslim, if this is happening in a Muslim household, then the leadership needs to stand up and ask the difficult question, why is this happening? What can we do? Why do we always need external bodies to dictate what can be done and what can't be done? Tomorrow, we will be talking about same-sex marriages. The question I'm asking is that legislation alone will become a hindrance. We need education, and we need the people who are suffering within their communities to stand up and ask the difficult question why this is happening.
I mean, Anita, I mean, you're in favour of the legislation, but presumably you would agree that legislation criminalising this kind of issue is a last resort, that the educational aspect that people have been talking about is fundamental.
Absolutely. I mean, as a charity, we were founded, you know, the main aim was to deal with prevention of forced marriage. We go into schools most days, and I'm delivering the book, But It's Not Fair, that I wrote, and it's being supported by the government. It's a piece of fiction, and every single school that we've been into, there's been at least one person come up to us that they or their friend has been about to be forced into a marriage. So it's a huge problem. And the government have announced, I was with the Prime Minister on Friday when he announced criminalisation of forced marriage, and there is going to be a package of support and education that's going to be put into every school in the UK to ensure that the education is actually there. And that's really crucial. It's not just lip service, it's ensuring young people are protected and they know what their rights are.
How do you think the legislation will be able to distinguish between something which is forced, i.e. presumably does not have the consent of the couple at the heart of the question, and more subtle pressures which exist in all communities, you know, to do with class and to do with status and parental authority and so forth?
Well, there's a huge difference between an arranged and a forced marriage, and I think often people from the outside are thinking, well, the government and the courts and the criminal justice system are not going to understand the difference. I think they're very clear about the difference. An arranged marriage is with consent, where parents, family are introducing you to someone they feel suitable, and you have the absolute right to say no. A forced marriage is where one or both parties do not have that choice. They are forced into this, and it leads to horrendous crimes. You know, suicide rate amongst Asian girls are 3 times higher than any other group in the UK. And a number of the reasons, well, one of the key reasons is being forced into marriage and the amount of pressure it puts on them. They don't want to go against what their parents say, but they have basic human rights that need to be adhered to.
Do you think, Saghir, do you think that whether you're for or against the legislation, that one of the ways that it may be used in the current political environment is a kind of Muslim bashing piece of legislation, even though actually its provisions will apply to any or a number of other communities?
You mean in the media? I think that's going to happen. You know, well, I think is it 46% of the cases that the forced marriage units have recorded are from children of Pakistani heritage. You can't deny that it's a problem, majority within the Muslim community. The newspapers aren't going to make it clear that this is a cultural issue, not a religious issue. I think it's up to the community to stand up and say, this is not something that our religion permits. You know, the majority voices who would completely disagree with it. It happens, although it's a cultural problem, it happens in a minority of families. It's not across, you know, the entire community, as newspapers might try to show.
Anwar, is that part of your concern, the way in which we might say ideologically the legislation will be presented?
Yes, absolutely, and I think the lady who just spoke is quite right, that it is happening in those communities, and those communities have to stand up. And I find that the leadership now needs to come out of the comfort zone and ask the question. And there are ways that can be done when somebody is getting married. I think the imam needs to ask the questions when he feels that there may be something uncomfortable. And I don't understand why we shy away from asking these difficult questions. When will we stand up and resolve our own problems? Why do we always have to be looking outside? And one of the issues is that, yes, it does happen in a Pakistani situation. Yes, it does happen in the Indian and the Bangladeshi communities. But the problem is that maybe it's because majority of the cases are females, and maybe our leadership is male. I don't know. All I know is that unless difficult questions are asked, we're not going to resolve this problem. Legislation alone will not resolve this situation.
Can I just come in on something? We talked about education. The reasons I have concerns about this legislation is because we've had forced marriage orders in place since about, I think, 2007, where a potential victim, can apply for an order to be placed against their parents, so they're not taken abroad and they don't have the marriage here. Now, if that order is breached, then you can, when the legislation comes in, that's when they can get arrested and charged and so forth. Now, the problem is that majority of the kids out there in the UK and the schools and the teachers aren't aware that this civil law, this forced marriage order exists. And the reason for that is because the schools just haven't promoted it. The Forced Marriage Unit in the Foreign and Home Office do excellent work, but the Department of Education has done absolutely nothing to back up their work. And you mentioned, Anita, that David Cameron has given commitment that these school packs will go out. But, are the schools really going to put up the posters and the leaflets, or are they going to be afraid of being accused of racism by their majority parents that are in that community?
I think we have to make this. This is certainly not just an Islamic Muslim issue at all. It happens within the travelling communities. It happens much wider. And so the government isn't looking at it in just that particular vein. In terms of education and schools, I've had commitment from the ministers that the educational authorities are looking at the work that we are doing at Freedom Charity, and every school we have approached have welcomed us in. We have a list now of over 200 schools that want us to go in and deliver assemblies and lessons in the book, but it's not fair. So we're not finding any schools that are shying away from it. And these are very diverse communities, very diverse schools. We're finding the complete opposite, actually. Schools are welcoming all the literature and information now, and I think with the legislation it will only protect young people more.
Are you worried, though, that in a climate where Islamophobia is a fact of life in the way in which these things are reported, that whatever, even if we accepted that the government's intention here is entirely well meant, that in the media it will be treated differently?
I think that's a risk, but then I think the community needs to come forward very clearly, and when there are cases of young people being subjected to forced marriage, that within the community it's dealt with before it even happens, before it goes that way. But I think there needs to be counter media of all the positive things that happen within communities and all the positive steps that are taken. All the positive things, the community are on the moves that they're actually making themselves. And I think that can be reported wholeheartedly as well.
And do you think that this issue, this problem, do you think it's a problem which, however serious the level of it is at the moment, that it's a declining problem or a problem that's growing?
It's a problem that is growing. I agree with what your speakers are saying, but as a teacher myself, I have visited over 850 schools. A lot of political correctness, a lot of tick boxing. Yes, we've had somebody from outside who's discussed the difficult issues, and we've done our jobs. We need to be educating the parents, the mothers, the hard-to-reach communities, and the information that comes out from the pulpit on a Friday sermon at a mosque will make much more impact on communities, and no disrespect to the people who are going to schools at all. But these people will listen to the Friday sermon. That is not happening. All I'm saying is that this will increase unless we ask the difficult questions. That's when are we going to have our next khutbah, when the Imam stands up and said, this is not acceptable, it's crime against humanity, our faith does not approve of this. Why should we, if these people are not listening to their own faith, why would they listen to some secular law? Will they have that understanding?
What's been happening with the orders that you referred to, Saghir? Are they implemented, or is this a kind of if you like, a premonition of what might happen with this piece of legislation, that it exists as a possibility but isn't actually implemented?
The orders have been very, very successful, because once they're in place, you can't marry that child off, you can't take them abroad. The problem has been that people don't know about them enough. So, for example, an average 15-year-old who feels that she's at risk, she might be taken abroad. Now she'll think, because nobody's advertised them, the schools haven't put the posters out, nobody's gone into the schools to discuss them, all she will think is that if she raises her voice now, her parents are going to go to jail. None of the communication hasn't been done, and that's what I worry about, that they don't know about the forced marriage orders, that this is the first step, that these are the safety nets, and when it comes to the absolute extreme, where the parents just don't listen and they say, no, you're going to get married, if they breach that forced marriage order, then the criminal side will come into it. But people aren't going to be aware of that.
Are you worried about that this will be a piece of window dressing legislation for the government, but not actually practically?
No, I don't actually. I think it's been made very clear that you're still going to have the civil side, the protection side on that, and this is just an added piece of armoury there to protect young people. I think we don't have anything to fear about it. I think the government have looked at it very sensibly and very sensitively, and they've done a wide consultation. And the majority of people, in every school we visited, I think 98% of all students we contacted wanted forced marriage to become a criminal offence. They were very clear. They were also aware about the protection orders that are available to them. But there needs to be another arm as well. We need to deal more with prevention and less about worrying about being politically correct and standing on eggshells. We need to be very clear that we're protecting young people, because when we're talking about forced marriage, we are talking about child abuse. Let's be very clear. That's what we're talking about.
Anwar, what do you think will be the impact on the victims here? Because that, in the end of the day, will be the acid test. Will it mean more people coming forward, or will it mean less people coming forward?
I think time will only tell. I've spoken to several people in the past few days, and people are apprehensive. Their loyalties will be divided, as we've said earlier. Do we put our parents in jail? Or do we run away? What happens to our other siblings when the parents are behind bars? What happens to those other siblings? Who takes care of them? So these are the questions that will be burdened onto a young person. Who's going to look after that conversation? So I think we wait and we see.
For example, there's a charity called Refuge, and they did a survey with all their girls that they have, and every single one of them said that they would not have left their homes, walked away if that criminal law had been in place when they'd done so, because they're just terrified that exactly what Anjum said about that, what would happen to their families.
I mean, we have the same argument, this argument happened in the UK over 30 years ago when they talked about domestic violence becoming a criminal offence. And it hasn't deterred people. In fact, more and more people come forward that are in abusive relationships and testify against each other. We're talking about the most extreme cases. I'm often in family court and I see children having to give evidence against their parents. It's not something anyone would wish to happen. But if it's about protecting people, that's what we have to do. And there will be protection and everything else available and afforded to young people that are in immediate danger. That has to be the way forward.
So if this is a last resort in the way that you described, and as you say, this only applies to will only apply in a minority of extreme cases where the person is willing to come forward. What is the rest of the what is the programme for the rest of, and therefore the majority of cases?
Well, the finite detail hasn't been gone into yet.
I don't mean so much just in the legislation. I mean outside this legislation.
Well, the government are putting more money in there. Charities and government agencies are all geared up now to support people that come forward that say they're about to be forced into marriage, and all the same guidelines and all the same protection is still there. So you still will have refugees, you still will have sisters, you still will have all that protection available there, but it'll just be the final straw if it does come to that.
Anwar, what do you think? If this is a sort of last case, a most desperate case solution, or even if as you believe it's not, what else needs to happen?
I like to see more awareness, more conversation taking place with intra-dialogue within individual communities where this is happening. I would like to see more involvement through education, not only just schools, but I'm looking at informal education as well. And I think we need to educate mothers the important part of women's voice, that we educate our mothers to say these are the things that can go wrong. And the question is, why do we have forced marriages in the 21st century? And those questions have to be asked rather than just putting icing on cake with a criminalization of a situation. We need to ask why this is happening.
Sophia, so what else? Even if this is the last case and it works the last case, what about all the other cases?
I think in the community needs to stand up and take responsibility through their mosques. I think a few months ago there was a visit throughout England of the Mufti of Kashmir. Was invited by the community, and he went around 5 cities: Bradford, Bristol, Manchester, Birmingham and London. And they held big rallies, and he stood up and he said, this is completely wrong, you can't be doing this. Now, the problem is, forced marriages happen a lot in the Kashmiri community, so you've got the Mufti standing up. This is a cleric that they respect and listen to. But we've only had that one guy do it. I've never heard of any other case where clerics have stood up and said, this is forbidden in Islam. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, it's not a valid marriage if you force someone, if there's no consent. I think the community needs to do a lot more. The prevention will come from the community. And then if you still have those extreme cases where parents still go ahead with it, despite it being forbidden in Islam, then fine, the criminal law can come in then. But before that, I think, we need to do more in schools. We need the religious side to do more.
Okay, well, thanks very much. That brings us to the end of this week's programme. My thanks to my studio guests, and I hope that you'll be joining us again in the future for another edition of the Politics and Media programme.